Good evening. It is late in the evening, and in two different states, two men have just returned from Godzilla 1984, Godzilla 2014. Oh, how I wish I was in 1984 again.
Don't we all? Don't we all?
Seriously, yeah,
No,
Godzilla
no,
2014.
no, maybe a lot of people don't. Maybe
Yeah,
a lot
well,
of people watching this are saying, "What the hell are you guys talking about? We weren't alive in 1984."
yeah. Oh, don't even. Let's not even get into that. That scares the fuck out of me whenever I think about that.
Pretty bad.
Um, oh, Lord, getting old. Anyway, so myself and Schu. Hi, I'm John Santo. With me is John Schuster. John Schuster. There he is. We have both seen the new Gareth Edwards interpretation of the classic Toho character Godzilla. We have not discussed this at all. We have no idea how the other one feels about this movie yet. Shu being the resident Godzillologist, maybe kaijuologist?
Kaijuologist.
Kaijuologist. I'm really excited to hear what you thought.
Okay, I'm gonna show you a little prop here.
Okay.
This prop is from 100% cranberry juice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. 100% cranberry juice is very sour.
Okay.
It is also reminiscent of my mood right now.
Oh dear.
I have waited my entire life for an American movie to get Godzilla right. And I'm still waiting.
Really?
Yes. It's not very good. It's just not very good. I'm not going to say that it's 1999 Godzilla bad.
Sure.
It's not very good. And I think, okay, let's start with part one. What's the movie called, and what did the movie not nearly have enough of? Let me give you an idea. They're both the same thing. Yes, that would be Godzilla. Godzilla is a secondary figure in the movie named after that creature.
Okay.
Basically an afterthought in this film.
Okay, time out though. He's always the secondary. He's always secondary in his own movies, though.
No, okay. What is he generally secondary to in his own movies?
Everything. It's if we look at Godzilla, if we look at the 1954 Godzilla,
Mm-hmm.
he shows up twice, maybe three times if you include kind of the little thing of his head popping up on the island.
Right.
And then he attacks. He's got the giant attack in Tokyo in the middle, and then the final battle that takes place where he's destroyed by the oxygen destroyer.
Right.
Created, by the way. Speaking of which, by the way, I don't know if you caught this or not, but oh my God, I feel horrible. I can't think. Why am I not good with it? Sorry.
Ken Watanabe.
Yeah, Ken Watanabe. So Ken Watanabe's character was named after the same. It's the same name as the scientist who created the oxygen destroyer in 1954.
Right.
So anyway, so continue.
Okay. So there's not enough Godzilla. Okay. What's even worse in a movie about Godzilla is that not only did Godzilla play second fiddle, Godzilla basically played third fiddle in this film. He played second fiddle at the very least. I'm going to call Godzilla he for the sake of argument.
Sure.
Godzilla played second fiddle behind a pair of one-off monsters who have never been introduced before, and much of the focus was significantly more on them than it actually was on the namesake of this film, which I thought was also problematic and at the very least curious, and that's something we can get back to a little bit later. Beyond that, this movie probably should have been called Generic Military. It shouldn't have been called Godzilla, because this had so many generic military moments and a series of characters who I really wasn't particularly interested in, nor did I think acted particularly well along the way, that I felt like it was ultimately a lumbering story that more often than not almost consistently missed the mark. That's part one.
Okay.
Part two, and for those of you who watched some of our Santo and I's past Film Geek Primers conversations where we've talked about Godzilla and effects specifically, we got into some discussions about Pacific Rim. We got into the effects related to Pacific Rim. One of the things we were looking forward to in this Godzilla was, unlike Pacific Rim, which was going to cheat which did cheat in regards to its effect. Always at night, always in rain. They did that because they could cover the effects. They did the exact same thing in this film.
I will agree and disagree with that one, but continue.
Okay, go ahead and disagree.
Okay, I will agree. They did do rain and they did do night, but unlike Pacific Rim, they didn't do pitch black night and they didn't do can't see through rain. I actually thought the visual effects stuff was pretty stunning. As a matter of fact, to the point where they did this weird mishmash of it looks like models. It's like they crossed CGI with man in suit. So it was kind of a nice balance between the two. So you don't have a fast-moving Godzilla, and you don't, the creatures still had this kind of, I don't want to say artificiality to them, but there was something very kind of model, something about their textures and everything that was very kind of model feeling, huh?
They kind of lumbered.
Yes, they lumbered. Yeah, and I mean especially during the battle in San Francisco,
right?
Where you get a lot of the more wrestling move, classic Godzilla kind of stuff, right? Where it's the attacks and the go for the neck, and you see him swing him around. And the first Muto is the male Muto, the flying Muto, is like smashed into the building finally to be killed,
right. Which is a nice shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, it's a great.
Here's what this movie largely was to me. It was a lot of good ideas, and it was a lot of imaginary shots, one-off shots. But when it came to actually carrying out the story, carrying out the idea, providing the background necessary in all of this, I think when the specifics of the details were completely lost on this project. Let's break down the story for an instance here. And for those who are watching who may not have seen it, there may be a couple spoilers in our conversation.
I'm going to put spoiler in the description, big ass spoiler up top in the description. Good. So I think we should be allowed free to talk about anything. That's not what we're about. We're not about.
Let's start with one of let's start with one of the main story aspects of it. Okay, I can't tell from a human storytelling aspect what this movie is trying to tell me and what the characters are trying to emote and explain to me. The best possibility here is Bryan Cranston is in this movie for about less than Godzilla is, and he's in the movie for about a half hour. Okay, yeah. Yep. He has this setup sequence at the beginning where a creature causes him to trap his wife, played by Juliette Binoche, in the opening sequence of the film because he has to save the nuclear plant, which is ultimately destroyed anyway. We find out later that a Muto creature, the one-off monster that looks like it's borrowed largely from one of the 1990s Gamera bad guys, Legion, which I think appears in the second newer Gamera movie, which is okay. Muto looks pretty good. It's got some. It's fine. Cranston then dedicates the rest of his life to try to prove that the government's hiding a monster. Okay? So we go to a follow-up scene where, coincidentally, the monster just happens to be popping up in the nuclear, the quarantine area where they ultimately are, is about to have another a Muto attack. All right? And it's in the follow-up to this Muto attack where ultimately Bryan Cranston dies. Okay?
Right.
So you have a son who belongs to the military, who has lost not one, but two parents to a specific monster, and doesn't really go into any sort of specific reactionary component in regards to this at all. It's not even a revenge film. It's not really I want to protect my family film. It's sort of a quasi-generic, yeah, there's a military, yeah, they're gonna fight something sort of thing, but there isn't a singular character. Once Cranston has been killed, there isn't a singular character in this film that I can get behind or rally behind who feels like there's some sort of visceral connection or bitterness toward what this creation has ultimately done. So from a human storytelling standpoint, I felt like it failed.
I do have to agree with you 100% on that one, though I don't think it bothered me as much as you, but I will agree. And I don't know whether we blame, and again, excuse me, no, blame is a strong word. I don't know whether Aaron Taylor Johnson's decisions to play his character much more emotionally detached and stoic is really how he is throughout the entire piece.
Yeah, yeah, and I never feel any connection to him.
Yeah,
And,
he's a tough one to get behind. I agree.
and folks that I watched the film with, and we can get into this a little bit later. It's maybe sort of entertaining. Considered him as bad an actor as they have seen in quite some time, and I felt there was he's the guy who's it's been thrust upon for him, not Cranston, who maybe could have carried that through, not Watanabe, who maybe could have carried that through, who then has this weird, later in the film, weird throwaway stopwatch Hiroshima moment from his dad, who was obliterated by the atomic bomb, which was a complete throwaway tribute to the original. And
Yeah.
A couple of those things that fell under that cat. There was a lot of lumbering, unnecessary storytelling, I thought. So from a human standpoint, and let's be fair, and all Godzilla movies are like this, and the reality of the monster movie genre is we're still not advanced enough to the point where we can tell a first frame to last frame story focusing on constant monster attacks. It's effects expensive. It's a very difficult thing to do.
Sure.
But I felt like from an effects standpoint, this movie was almost as much a tribute to Cloverfield as it was to the original Godzilla films. And Cloverfield ultimately did it better. Cloverfield was a much better paced film than this ultimately was. And I'll give you a couple of effects examples that really irritated me. Okay. They did a lot of, we're watching the monsters behind school bus windows. We're watching the monsters behind goggles. We're watching the monsters behind building windows. We see portions of the fight scene through some quasi-human angle, which is a little bit different, that we can kind of blink onto and blink off of from time to time. And there's this great scene where the two monsters, Godzilla and the male Muto, are about to get into a fight sequence.
The Vegas fight.
I think that may be it.
Yeah, the Vegas fight.
It's just about to happen. And they start to go head-to-head, and they cut to a sequence of the military. And the military getting involved in a plan that takes up literally a third of the film, that never has a chance to work, and we don't care if it does or not.
Right.
So it's kind of like, why in the world? You've built this entire thing up to have a battle sequence. You've led into a battle sequence. You're starting a battle sequence, and you decide to cut away from a battle sequence to go to a military sequence that has no chance of success, and frankly, nobody cares whether it succeeds or not. Because we know this is, at this point, supposed to be a movie not about humans trying to salvage something, because, again, there's no real connection, as far as I'm concerned, with any of the human characters. They're just sort of generically military, kind of going through the process, and they come up with some vague sort of plan that's something, when what we want to see here, and the reason I think that you go to a Godzilla movie is to see Godzilla fight other monsters.
Sure.
And that was taken away from us. And I felt like throughout the course of this movie, from an effect standpoint, a lot of it was taken away from us. And Vegas was a great example of this. You had an opportunity to show destruction during the day, and you decided to cut away, show shots of hotels and people inside hotels, and create this imagery of the aftermath of destruction, instead of actually showing daytime effects-related destruction. And that looked to me like this movie isn't advanced enough to pull this off, and it felt like I was cheated.
Interesting. See, I got something very different from that, which was so one of the things they did that that they did incredibly well, that I thought, and we're going to do the Pacific Rim thing is going to keep popping up over and over again, but I'm going to stay away from that. But one of the things I think that it did very well was intimate scale. Right, and that was because they continually, the camera again was almost much like in Cloverfield. The camera was always with people. You know, you rarely get the sky shots. Not until the very final battle do you finally kind of get the camera frees itself up, and it's now these Eye of God shots, watching the monsters from a distance or close up or whatever, actually battling it out. You know, you're never in their fight until that last 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the film. So I really appreciated the let's keep everything down where the people are, so you always understand the immensity of these creatures. What I liked about the you're either there. What I liked about the only catching it in the aftermath, or only being there before, is that's when, to some extent, the people are alive. It's like if you're there afterwards, you're basically safe, but you see everything that has been wrought. If you're there beforehand, you're safe because everything's okay and you can kind of sense something coming. If you're there when something comes, you're fucked. And that's every time that they showed people in the middle, as the battles were going down, everything else like that. That's when you would see just people getting laid to waste. The Hawaii sequence is the biggest example of that. Is the first time that Godzilla comes out of the ocean and creates the tidal. Was it Godzilla or the Muto that creates the tidal wave?
I'm not sure.
I believe it was Godzilla. Yeah. So Godzilla first comes out to create the tidal wave. And it's and it's basically and people on the beach start seeing this thing coming in, and they of course, and what's great is nobody knows who Godzilla is. This concept of monsters. This is
we will get to in a moment, but which I want to cover in a moment as well. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, but so now all of a sudden people are screaming typhoon, typhoon, which is fair because that's what you'd run from, and you get to see all these people running and the stuff, the giant wave crashing down and people getting wiped away. People getting crushed at the nuclear power plant, or where the nuclear power plant was, I should say. Yeah, when you see the Muto stepping on people. I don't think you ever see Godzilla step on anybody per se.
No, and that's a very that's a very interesting point that we should probably cover as well.
Okay.
And we'll work backward a little bit here.
Godzilla is the good guy. And now, excuse me, no. Godzilla's not a good guy. Godzilla's doing what Godzilla does. He's not purposely trying to
which happens to benefit, which happens to limit destruction here. Okay.
Yeah.
However, and this is what I think what they're kind of looking at in the second one, because Godzilla doesn't actually step on anybody. Godzilla, there's certainly destruction, but Godzilla and the last one of the last sequences at the end of the movie. There's a Cloverfield-style news helicopter shot with a graphic at the bottom that says Godzilla, King of the Monsters or Savior of our city.
Question mark, yeah.
When I'm reading that at the end, I had to laugh at that because they haven't figured out through this entire film how to treat what Godzilla is, because, again, he's a secondary component to the other monsters and to the military that's trying to stop something.
Sure.
And then at the end, they make him out basically to be Batman. So you're setting up this secondary film where you're going to have this vigilante debate about whether Godzilla needs to be killed or not, or whether he's more damaging as a destructive force and has to be taken care of, or whether we ultimately leave him alone.
Right.
And it's sort of like, well, okay. That would have been a little bit more interesting than what I saw here, so maybe I can ultimately look forward to that if this thing makes a lot of money at the box office.
Right.
But if this is supposed to be an origin film, it was among the worst described origin films I think I've seen. It spent more money as an origin, or more time as an origin film setting up the Muto creatures, which again aren't going to be long term, and sort of just brushed past Godzilla. There's sort of a cursory explanation as to kind of what it is, and it sort of pops up, and it's this great hunter, even though it really kind of just hunts and then, or it kind of gets in battles and then kills things. It doesn't actually eat anything. It doesn't actually, there isn't. It's sort of like Godzilla is almost a prop in this film. He's
described by Ken Watanabe's character as a universal equalizer. When something goes out of balance, Godzilla is there to balance things back out again. Is how he describes him.
That would be interesting if in the second movie or a movie down the road, and of course this becomes a Monster of the Week type franchise. Mm-hmm. If there are follow-ups, and again, The
I was going to
marketing.
say this is what you're doing now is getting into this odd speculation thing, which kind of doesn't deal with this film.
And you're right. The previews have been fantastic. The marketing's been a brilliantly marketed film. And for a lot of reasons, I was ultimately let down. But then if that's the case, you could get into this discussion or get into a script perhaps that discusses whether humans are the great equalizer, and if Godzilla needs to equalize what humanity has ultimately done. That may have been as interesting to me as a one-off monster. None of that gets discussed in this. I thought Godzilla's origin story was really cursory. There was the brief discussion early on. There was they wanted to nuke it, to kill it, and that ultimately didn't work in the 50s and kind of disappeared. That was not a bad idea, that they created the bombs not to have better weaponry, but they created the bombs to kill this big monster. I thought that was an example of what a lot of this movie had. The movie had flips. It had a good idea every now and then. It had a really good shot every now and then, but it felt to me like its ability to connect the dots and run it all the way through, they didn't have that, and it ultimately lumbered and came up a lot shorter than I wish it had.
That's fair. Now, okay, I've just finished watching GMK. Is that the three initial one? Okay, I just finished watching GMK last night. I watched it over 2 nights. There's very little monster stuff in that movie. There are a couple moments, with Mothra attacking some people on a boat. With let's see, who else is there? Oh, right, Ghidorah doesn't show up until the very end. There's this kind of old man caves rock totems that get to us until we finally get Ghidorah. And then who's it? Baragon? Is that the other one that's in there?
Yeah, Baragon is in that.
For a while, so yeah, Baragon's there for a little bit at the top, and so you can have kind of an early fight with him and Godzilla that doesn't last very long. But that's another. It's and again, this is, and I think it's one of the better films of the second generation. I think, as we talked about.
I agree, and we talked earlier, and I would put it in the top 3 or 4.
Yeah, but it has. I mean, it has so much human filler that really isn't much. I mean, it's like you've got the female reporter, you've got her father who's in the military. You've got her reporting staff who have gone off the air, and they're basically now running a guerrilla TV station, and then all this other kind of human stuff and all these other human things that really don't mean much, and the only human emotion story is her and her father, and that thing doesn't really click until basically it's okay, Dad's going to take the submarine with the Godzilla destroying missiles down into the water to try to help this thing out, and that's where they kind of try to finally lock in on some human element. But in most of the Godzilla films, minus the original, the people never really, even though the people fill up most of the story time, they don't really add anything to most of these films, I feel. No?
I think there are some that do it better than others.
Okay, I'll agree. And
again, if your excuse here is that I don't think the Japanese did character involvement very well and used human fill, and this movie was basically the same as those movies, shouldn't this movie still strive to be more, and shouldn't it ultimately be more?
I do agree with you 100% there. I think that it should. I think that every film should take what has come before it and find ways to improve upon it and make it something better. I'm just simply saying that in a string of 60 years actually now of Godzilla movies, that it at least doesn't, and see, the problem is then, of course, it's like, the only real, if we look at the American released movies, we've got King of the Monsters, which was the original film that they just inserted a bunch of Raymond Burr stuff and pulled out all the real material.
Right.
The Godzilla 1984, which was just a nightmare.
Right.
Then the Emmerich film, which takes Nightmare to a whole new level.
It does, because it doesn't treat the subject matter seriously.
Seriously, yeah. Not only does it not treat the subject matter seriously, but Godzilla himself has no personality.
Right. This is very Jurassic. It's very much a Jurassic Park remake. And this one felt a lot like a Cloverfield remake to a large degree.
Yeah, so, and it's interesting because actually the Cloverfield monster, to me, if I remember correctly, had certain Muto qualities about
Yes.
it.
Yes.
But, yeah, so...
See, because here's, it's, and maybe that's, let me ask you, I mean, I've rambled here, I'm gripey, I'm of course bitter and jaded and all those sorts of things. I have a dog in the fight and the rest of it.
Sure, sure.
If you recognize in this format that human fill is still necessary for whatever reason that you choose, whether it's effects related, whether you believe that you can't connect to the monster, and as a result you need some sort of human bridge for the audience to get there, do you feel like you had any human connection in this film whatsoever?
No, but I hate to say this. To me, it was never about the human connection in a weird way. It wasn't
about the human connection.
Yeah.
Then there wasn't enough monster special effect to make it work.
And to me, I would disagree because I think that the monster stuff was doled out in such a way, and to me, also the lack of human connection. Now they do have it wants to have human connection, I should say. It has this theme of family going through. Or about so you've got the Aaron Taylor Johnson plays the son of Bryan Cranston and Juliette Binoche in 1999. He's like what 8, 10, something like that when the first attack comes. He loses his mom. 15 years later, Dad is considered crazy and trying to get to the bottom of this conspiracy. He has joined the army or the military. He's got a wife and a son. The son is 3. Is what he claims to be Bryan Cranston. So you now have kind of this next generation picking up the mantle thing. I feel there's more there. And I'm not saying emotionally. I think there's probably an interesting, intelligent level thing going on here that may take me another viewing to kind of grasp onto more, because there were specific moments like I loved Cranston's moment, and again, I don't think Cranston actually does a great job in this film. I don't think any of the human actors have a lot to chew on, and I give it that. I think it's very thin human, but at the same time, I feel they are base level archetypes because it's much more universally easy for them to latch onto. Unlike Pacific Rim, I think, where the archetypes didn't work, I feel the archetypes work more here because anybody can relate to having a father, having a mother, being afraid that one of them is gone, right? I think because theoretically, except for the few test tube babies out there, we all have parents. We can all kind of relate to family issues or something of that ilk. But that Aaron Taylor Johnson's, and I don't know if I'm trying to take his decisions of like this weird cold thing that he does as a poor acting chops, or a conscious decision to not remain emotional during this thing, because he helps. There's a little Japanese kid who gets locked on the subway with him, and he's like, "I'll get you to your parents." And so there's this weird little thing about him showing it's like the things are technical more than emotionally based, if that makes sense. Like all of the action.
I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, it's formal character building versus emotional character building.
And it really, it falls back on the whole childhood thing a lot.
A lot, yeah.
Let's show a child. Okay, let's use the child as a prop. It happens to be a random kid who sees Godzilla first.
Sure, and there's also when the typhoon comes, the parents are running, and they do a lot of concentration on the little girl, on the daughter that he's carrying, watching the wave come down.
And I feel like that is almost exploitative because they don't have what they should there. So
yeah,
it feels like a cheap ploy to me because they haven't develop the characters enough to make them interesting to me.
It's highly possible. I wouldn't doubt that to some extent. But also at the same time, they are again formalized. They're symbolic more than they are human. And I was kind of okay with that, because what I really liked about was this interesting slow reveal of Godzilla. So you have because the first time we see him, it's like you catch a couple limbs. His scales, I don't know what you call the little fins on his back or anything like that. Those are really prominent for a large chunk of the film. And it's this, and there's this interesting ticking clock as he is swimming, or as he is swimming from Hawaii to San Francisco, or to Vegas actually first. The guy's got a great travel agents, because he somehow he bypasses all the way to Vegas.
Amazing. He's got some cool people.
And then comes swimming back up. But yeah, and there's some real dislogic as far as, because the entire timing is constructed down to, it feels like less than 72 hours.
Right.
You know, once the Muto hatches, you have it's a really constricted timeline. And that helps. That's there to build the suspense. But you've got the Navy following him, just trailing alongside Godzilla. And Godzilla, what I really like is Godzilla's not bugging them as they're in the water. As he's swimming, right. He doesn't give it. It's kind of neat, because we are so inconsequential. Humanity is so inconsequential to what the real story is, and I really liked how our actions are completely futile. And maybe that's I don't know if maybe it's trying to say something about that, or about kind of the whole thing with Godzilla, because it's always about, how do we get the monster? How do we do this? Every plot is about, let's build the new Godzilla destroyer device. Let's do this. Let's do that. This is how we're going to contain the situation. And no matter what, it always ends up being completely useless. We are ants to these gods,
right.
of Godzilla and Muto and stuff like that. And so everything that we do really has no effect. And so when that whole King of the Monsters or Savior of our City thing comes up, it's neither. He is, well, King of the Monsters, he is. Savior of the City, not really, because he couldn't give a shit. I mean, he never turns around to give us the thumbs up as he walks out.
However, what happens here is that consistently they try to go down that road, but they chicken out on it. Muto is always the monster that's trampling people, that does more destruction, trying to get from one place to another. The extent of Godzilla's destruction is he slides under most ships. He rattles a couple other ships when he comes up a little bit, but it's sort of like the A-Team. You never actually see Godzilla kill anybody.
But he does walk through the bridge.
And also, there are a couple sequences in the fights where the two Muto monsters gang up on Godzilla, and it looks like they're about to take Godzilla down, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, there's a noise created by some human military element that saves Godzilla. And the Mutos go attack that, and it takes their attention away from Godzilla. This happens a couple times. Humans incidentally,
and that's the thing. Very incidentally, and I think that's important.
In a weird, again, I feel like they try to make Godzilla Batman in this movie, and they can't quite figure him out. They don't take fate nearly far enough as much as I'd probably like for them to see. There's a definite feeling, even though they're supposed to have no emotional attachment whatsoever because they're in this for themselves, that the Muto monsters are the bad monsters and Godzilla actually is perceived as something of a good monster, when the actuality is that they're both just completely neutral and have no interest in the periphery at all. But the way that it's filmed, the way that it's shot, the decisions that are made give Godzilla a connection to the human component that is fighting against these monsters, much more so than Muto does.
I would say yes. I agree with you 100%, but it's also us trying to personify Godzilla, to make Godzilla look like, and again, I think the news story is, because it's not until the end where he's not perceived as anything per se up until he's killed the creatures, because he's fired upon. They do fire upon him in San Francisco when he finally raises, and they start. And not only do they start firing on him, but they're now firing on kids in buses on the bridge accidentally. It's like they're doing exactly what Godzilla's doing, which is accidentally killing people in the wrong way.
In an aside, this is one of the things lost in the morass of disaster that was the Emmerich and Devlin Godzilla from the late 90s. In every one of the New York sequences there, it's the military that does the damage and not Godzilla, which is just trying to escape.
Sure, yeah.
Much of this movie, and that's supposed to be, that's a classic Emmerich evil corporate military bully theme that runs through a lot of his films.
Right.
This one does it to a much lesser degree, but they both have that element, that there's a little bit of collateral damage going on.
Right.
This one does it better. than that one ultimately did, but that component is in both of them.
Right.
Which brings me to one other point that you sort of, I think, rolled into a little bit that I did want to get to. I think the problem with American retelling of Godzilla films, or maybe the monster movie in general, certainly Godzilla is the best example because it has a cultural reference to another location, which is why I think Japan has done a better job in some of its movies of having characters who connect with what the metaphor is supposed to be about and a recognition of how they're attempting to deal with it. There's a better connectivity here as opposed to it being some sort of natural disaster element.
Sure.
The problem ultimately, I think, from an American perspective, is that they haven't figured out ultimately how to personify a lizard. They can do it with Planet of the Apes. They can do it with King Kong. They obviously have that thrown in a number of, the Marvel Universe, DC type stuff. Mm-hmm. But they can't figure out how to personify a lizard, and it creates a disconnect, I think, from what it is they're trying to get across, which means they need to figure out how to do a better job with the human component, and again, to me, I think they failed pretty consistently throughout this film. Whether they were at a level that was similar to many of the Japanese movies or not, if that's what you're hanging your hat on, then I just don't think he did a good enough job. Because I think there are themes that you can attack. I think there are issues that you can discuss. I think there are approaches that you can utilize, and I felt like this movie came up short.
Well, I'll tell you, I think now, last time, of course, we discussed the American filmmaking technique of we as victims versus being our own undoing. And I believe this film does a better job of it somewhat being our fault, because everything happens due to this is a really interesting anti-nuclear power theme.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because the entire thing takes place because of the whole concept of the film being back when these creatures walked the earth, these magnificent giant creatures walked the earth back when radiation levels were incredibly high on the surface. As those receded, so did they. Now that we are bringing back these forms of energy and everything and weapons that are based on nuclear power, radiation. Then that is drawing these creatures back to us. We, in going the wrong route, in creating destructive forces, what could be considered destructive forces, such as nuclear power, radiation, which of course they say right off the bat, they make it very clear that radiation will kill you in a heartbeat, because you've got the radiation cloud that's chasing after Juliette Binoche, and
right.
Then you have the zone of radiation where Cranston and Johnson are there with their little homemade hazmat suits on, and and Cranston sees the coyotes and then pulls his mask off, and he's like, "That's deadly radiation. We'd be dead by now if it was legit." So they're very much saying this stuff kills people, and the monsters then are the symbols of the destruction that this type of power and this type of energy can bring upon us if we are not careful.
Even though, and it's interesting that you brought that up, I thought a lot of that was pretty good. The stuff with Cranston, I thought was pretty well done and generally acceptable. I was along for the ride then. Curiously, when Cranston died and it was no longer his vehicle, and it was becoming clear that it really wasn't Godzilla's vehicle either.
Right.
That, to me, is where I think the movie really died.
Yeah, I would say that when we think Cranston's dead and then we find him actually injured and still alive, I was really hoping it was going to turn into a Cranston-Watanabe debate partnership. Mm-hmm. Because you have two characters with two very, considering Watanabe's a scientist, this whole open the book of myths and Godzilla, these are really more like, these are our gods, thing. Was kind of this fascinating take, and I would love to know if any of his stuff is left on the cutting room floor, because again he only seems to be there to be an exposition delivery device.
Exactly. I felt that way too. I felt like there was 20 minutes maybe left off of this film.
And yeah,
and a lot of scenes in the trailers, and I know this happens a lot, that weren't even in the movie.
Yeah.
And they seemed to be parts in the trailer that were utilized that had more emotional impact than the choices that they ultimately made. So I have this feeling that maybe somebody decided we can't make this movie 2.5 hours long. We'll try to get it down to 2:10. And the decision making in that process may have really hurt the emotional component that might have been a little bit more available from a human standpoint. I'll tell you, to me, the most interesting potential character in this film that was completely underutilized, and I think the story that I would have told based on the pieces that you have on the board, were the two Mutos. They had potential to do a lot of, I think, fairly interesting stuff with them. Because what you're dealing with is this entire food chain issue. There's a male Muto, there's a female Muto. The female Muto's about to have a bunch of kids. Okay? Right. If she pops out a bunch of kids, humanity's in deep shit because there are a lot of these things floating around and we can't stop them. Okay? So now you're dealing with a who's at the top of the food chain issue. However, had you told that story from another direction, had you told that story from the Muto perspective a little bit more, you have two creatures who have no idea what world they've been thrust into, and their whole point of being is to survive. And they're being bombarded by this predator element that they have no idea what it actually is, so they have to fight back against it, and this larger entity that's going after them as well. So really, they're the bad guy prop in this, when they should have been a focal point for what survival is about and the lengths that you will go to try to make survival ultimately work.
See, now that's interesting because
that would have been an interesting. That might have been an interesting approach.
See, and that's fascinating because you perceive them to be the antagonists. What really I do see them as all they're doing is just being what they are, which is to survive. And I mean, the location of, I mean, the fact is they're basically meeting at a midway point between how they've been separated. And gathering at a place where there is going to be forms of radiation so they can feed and create their new children and create baby Mutos. So for me, I never looked at any of the monsters as more than the lizard brain, literally that which, what do we need to do to survive and procreate and keep our species going, and that's all they seem to be doing for me. And so I never saw them as antagonists per se, except except for Watanabe, of course, or excuse me, let me use his name. Serizawa is the Dr. Ichiro Serizawa is the character, basically kind of applying mythology to it, and to me that is something that we humans do because to explain the unexplainable. Right, so so science. So he does this interesting science angle of these are these creatures. These are this is how they evolved. This is why they went away, and this is now why they're coming back. But at the same time, he then mixes in the interesting mythology of he would be considered a god, hence we call him Gojira, kind of thing. But really, again, all they are just animals. And although there's this unexplainable thing in science that he can't grasp, which is why does Godzilla do what Godzilla does? Why does he continually? Why is his job to keep balance? And it's something that science can't explain right now, even though there must be some kind of scientific reasoning behind it. So what he's doing is he's applying a old ancient mythology to it, the same way that in the 1954 version. They talked about the great monster who they would have to sacrifice their daughters to keep it appeased. Even though, and who knows, again, who knows why the creature does what they do, why these creatures do what they do. We can't explain it. We don't have a reason for it. So we have to build a story to satiate our own fears and questions. And at the end, when Godzilla is declared king of the monsters or savior of the city, it's that same thing of us wanting to give an answer so we feel safer about something. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. I feel like based on that last sequence, you're going to have a bunch of counterpoints on Fox News and CNN trying to
totally.
decide whether he's king of the monsters or a savior of the
Savior of
city.
the City, yeah. Also, by the way, also I feel that why they cut the other reason I feel why they cut a bunch of Watanabe's stuff out is his assistant is played by Sally Hawkins, who is an incredible actress. I mean, she's of the Juliette Binoche level of actress. She's from England. She was in Happy Go Lucky, a Mike Leigh film, and has really kind of established herself as a very talented and skilled actress. And she's given literally the carry the notepad sidekick character here.
Right.
And it's given, and she has a couple looks, like even at the end when Watanabe's watching Godzilla and Godzilla like wakes back, so I really liked that Godzilla takes some hits. Godzilla takes a beat down. He has his hero moment when he comes back, but at the end you get that great shot of him kind of collapsing and you think he's dead.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the end when he wakes up and Watanabe's standing there, like they have some he like for some reason he's like he's more fascinated with the creature and its survival skills than he is looking up to it like a hero, if that makes any sense. And she's kind of but I don't know, and she's there, and it's just this odd shot with the two of them standing there as Godzilla wakes up and lifts his head and snorts and does everything like that. But he and it's like there should be something there emotionally. You feel that there's supposed to be something there emotionally, a connection of some sort, or a yes, I was right, or whatever it is that Watanabe's supposed to be feeling in that moment.
Yet it's not
There's
there.
stuff. It's not there because something's missing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I live in Tucson. I drove to Phoenix. There's a longtime friend of mine has a kid who's 15 years old, who is a huge Godzilla fan. Has all them and God bless him, he insists on watching the letterbox versions in Japanese.
Nice. Good for him.
Okay. Exactly. Good for him. He knows the material front to back. He's up on everything. He's got a subscription to GFan. He knows what's going on here. This was going to be... He's been excited about this movie and has had it on the calendar and has been counting it down for months. Okay? He has been absolutely jonesed about this movie, watching the new previews, getting all the feedback, reading the reviews, pleased that Toho gave it its seal of approval, that the Japanese people said he was fat, which was one of the things I didn't really see.
He's bulky. He's bulky. He may be big bone.
Yeah, maybe. Could be. And honestly, as a quick aside, I expected this to be much better than it is. But ultimately came out of it feeling like it was this summer's Prometheus. That it had all kinds of potential, that ultimately disappointed more than it succeeded in what it was trying to get across. And this kid didn't make the Prometheus connection, but I think was immensely disappointed with what he was seeing on the screen, and that was kind of a bummer. And I saw this movie with him, his dad, and his older brother.
Right.
And me and his dad go back 30 years. I don't know that we've ever agreed on a movie. We have entirely disparate approaches and tastes. He's much more forgiving than I am. And he hated this film.
Interesting.
So all four of us thought it was bad. And I was hoping that one of the people here as I'm watching this, and again, it wasn't Emmerich and Devlin bad, although we got in an argument about that, and two of the people who saw this thought the Emmerich and Devlin version was better. And it was actually
that honestly brings them into question then.
But it was actually better filmmaking. That it was a better movie. Now, which I don't agree with. Now, me and the kid and I thought this was a better film.
Sure.
But beyond that, none of us liked it. And yeah, I came out of it really. Ultimately, I think it really came up short. Pacing wise, it lumbered, and I really thought that they thought, and hey, you know, there are probably a lot of people out there who completely disagree with what I'm saying. I think to a large degree you disagree with what I'm saying.
Well, no. Actually, that's not true. I see exactly where you're coming from. For me, though, I think it's interesting. I think it's just an interpretation issue. I think we both interpret a lot of the same a lot of the same things, just in different ways. And I don't know if I'm doing that because I wanted to like the movie, therefore I don't know. And it's a movie actually I want to go see it again in the theater. I really had a good enough time with it that I would go and see it again in the theater. I like.
Did you see it in 2D or 3D?
I saw it in 3D.
So did I.
Yeah.
And it seemed unnecessary to me in 3D.
I think there were sequences that really worked in 3D. I think this was especially of like the post now that most of the stuff is post converted. I think some of the stuff worked really well in 3D. Some of it didn't really matter, but I think that Edwards I feel has a really solid eye for composure. I think he's willing to hold shots longer. I mean, this is not a man from a Michael Bay school. This is a man who really appreciates early Spielberg. I think there's the opening 15 minutes or so has a lot of kind of Close Encounters of the Third Kind-esque stuff going on with it. But I would say that yeah, I think the guy has a lot of talent, a lot of skill, and in a movie that, if you're a hardcore Godzilla fan, I get where you're coming from. And again, you're much deeper into this than I am. And the other question I had actually was, there's not really like a solid Godzilla mythology. It's like they never retcon. Like every film is kind of its own individual. Okay, and here's a Godzilla film, and sometimes
to a large degree is part of the problem here. I don't think the American audience grasps what the Godzilla origin story is. And so that should be explained more than it ultimately was, and they spent more time explaining the one-off monsters than really explaining Godzilla's backstory.
Right,
and
right.
Any reference to what it was that Godzilla ultimately does was sort of brushed aside. That's kind of like, you know, so there seemed to be a connectivity in the direction that they were ultimately approaching this, and to me, almost every decision that they made focused away from the title character and onto something else.
Right.
Whether it was story related or whether it was visually related, it all felt the same. And again, I mean, if you want to stack this movie up from an effects standpoint, it's the best effects gods movie out there.
Sure.
I think there were some significant effects flaws, and I felt like again they cheated me, and I think they could have done a better job. To me, when you do it in the rain and you do it at night, and you purposely don't have a daytime sunshine fight, you're doing it because you don't have it right yet. You just don't have enough confidence in your ability to deliver the effect at this stage in the game, and so you've got to figure out a way in your mind to be resourceful to try to get away with something.
And that may just be a technical flaw in visual effects right now, as is. I mean,
maybe it is, but it definitely jumped out to me like it did in Pacific Rim. Like, you're trying to put this thing together. You're trying to tell me that you've got the effects to get it done, but the reality of the situation is that you don't. I've seen Transformers during the day. Now, I've got
yeah, but those look like shit.
Dozens
those are cartoons.
Of complaints about Transformers. Okay, that we could go up and down and ridicule dub appropriately for on a fairly consistent basis.
Sure.
But at least a lot of that is daytime stuff. At least they're willing to give that a shot. And in a sick way, I suppose I'm appreciative of that. So I think it can be done. But I don't know, maybe it just can't be done. But when it can't be done, it feels to me like it limits what you have out there from an effects standpoint to the point where I notice that you're trying to cheat me, and you just aren't at that point quite yet. And I expected that to be done.
Gotcha.
So you know, I had a lot of. I just don't think it. I don't think it came anywhere near achieving, from a pace standpoint, a storytelling standpoint, a focus standpoint. It is. I came out of there ultimately just feeling like it wasn't very good.
Right.
And it wasn't the worst movie that I've ever seen, but I really thought it was going to be better than it was, and I felt like it let me down.
Your expectations simply were not met.
Yeah. Yep.
Hmm.
And I felt like I was let down, not even because of who I was watching with, based on, and I might as well get into confession mode here quickly. You've known me a long time.
Yes.
I struggle a lot with jaded criticism.
Yes,
I know that I'm a jaded old bastard. Okay? I know that it's easy for me to find flaws and to criticize and to dig and all that, and I recognize that personality trait about me.
Sure.
Yet I really wanted to, and this is something that's very close too, because since we're in confession mode here, I'm a guy who's wanted to write screenplays, who's hasn't had any success to that, and my dream would be to do a Godzilla movie.
Sure.
So with all of that in mind, it's easy for me to come into this and be jaded about what the final product is.
Sure.
But I'm trying to separate as well as I can what I saw, and I feel like it on a number of levels, and I think I've laid them out fairly well here. It came up short and could have been significantly better than it ultimately was. And I expected it to be much closer to getting to that point than what I ultimately got.
Right. No. I would say that I would say that your opinion is not jaded. I think your opinion is actually well founded, and you make a lot of very solid, strong arguments for why you are disappointed in the movie. I think also, though, some of it comes from, and I think the 15-year-old is the kid. How old is the kid?
That's about right. 15.
15. Yeah. I think and again, that love of something, and that huge knowledge base going in. Is in something like this a little more restrictive than someone like me who has watched Godzilla films casually throughout time. There's plenty of them I haven't seen. And I've watched a few of them over the past couple weeks in prepping to see this.
Right.
And for me, seeing it being exactly what these Godzilla films have been in the past, admittedly, I will say this: it definitely has not exceeded. Like, it's not better than the 1954 version in any way, shape, or form, right? I mean, that's hands down. It's not the best Godzilla film. Maybe it's in the top. Maybe it's not in the top 5, but it would break the top 10.
Okay.
So I'm not going to say this is. Is there room for improvement? Yes, I think there's quite a bit of room for improvement. Does it deliver what every good Godzilla film has delivered before it? I would say yes, except for the 1954 original, and that's one that we can't – it's like it stands alone. The original stands alone because
Right.
of what it's trying to do, right? Once it franchises out and all rules are out the fucking window for them, right?
Sure.
Then it's just kind of like they become their own thing. So you've got the 54 Godzilla, which was, the proto, and now you've got these other ones which are just happen to be the big.
Holy crap! We can make money off this franchise.
Yeah, exactly. The big guy. Let's put the guy in the suit again and let's have some fun with him. Because it's like, I mean, it's as far as even like Gamera films go and stuff like that. I mean, they started to, once they realized that Godzilla kind of was much more of a God, I almost feel like once everybody was like, yeah, it's a guy in a suit, they felt more comfortable making Godzilla's personality much more human and relating to people, humanity, and going, hey, I'm here. Look, I even got my little kid, and
There's also a big demographic shift too.
Yes, huge demographic shift. Agreed.
Where it goes from that is not that's a monster. The original is a monster movie that is not made for kids.
Right.
As the series progresses 8 years later, 10 years later, those are movies that are made for kids.
Sure, it's like it is now officially the kaiju genre.
Yeah.
And they've got multiple monsters doing multiple different series for multiple different reasons. For me, it delivered exactly what I was hoping it would deliver. It to some extent for me also it exceeded that because of the way the build up to get to Godzilla. The build, and the what you would have considered lumbering, I guess. I don't know. For some reason, for me, I felt tension. I felt this kind of this ticking time bomb clock thing going on. Now, of course, when it got to the human story of the bomb has been set. We've only got 5 hours and 27 minutes before it goes off, and we kill 100,000 people because what we thought we were going to do is a screw up. Whoops, we have no control over anything. That all of that feels a little forced, or we need to have the human element in there. We need to give our main guy something to do, and of course he has to be the quasi-hero with the killing off the Muto offspring, which I was trying to decide if that was a direct point at the '98 version.
That's kind of what I felt, yeah. Uh-huh.
Which was interesting.
They borrowed from that storyline again, which I thought was sort of interesting. But the scene itself that he utilized reminded me, do you remember Gargoyles? You might be a little bit too young from this. Gargoyles was a basically made-for-TV,
the one with Peter Fonda.
Yeah, I think that's correct. From about '74.
Right, and he's the pilot with the girl, and they go to the island.
They have to go to the cave where all of the it's set in the desert. They have to go to a cave where all of these gargoyle eggs are, and they have to set a flamethrower to the eggs so that the eggs don't hatch, and so that the gargoyles don't do exactly. The flame scene looked like it was straight out of Gargoyles, which is a cheeseball movie from again '74. But I swear, my dad and I watched that. Must have watched that 20 times.
Right.
It was like if Channel 3 or Channel 5 or whatever after the news on Saturday night needed an hour and a half to fill, they played Gargoyles.
That's right.
Bitch, I watched it every damn time.
Right.
So there's this flamethrower scene at the end where you basically use fire to kill the offspring, that's a great reference to a movie that nobody remembers from 40 years ago, including probably the director.
Right.
But I do, and I'm going with that. Damn it.
Fair enough.
Again, I thought it had shots. And
sure.
I thought it had good ideas. For instance, I'll give you an idea. There's chaos going on, and I think the wife of the main character is is in the midst of all this chaos, and she's looking fascinatedly at this guy who's in a parachute who's coming down.
That's a great little bit, yeah.
And then a couple seconds later, there's a plane that crashes into a building behind her. And we realize that the fighter, he's ejecting from the fighter jet.
Right.
That was a good sequence.
Yep.
The introduction to Godzilla is well done.
Yeah.
There are points there are areas and things that you can point to visually most notably, and I think even ideas that they try to touch on as far as the script is concerned, that you say, that's good.
Right.
Right. That's good.
Right.
That's good. And there are I'd say there are probably about 8 or 10 of those types of moments where the shot's really well done, where they had an idea going in. This is how we're going to approach this, and this is how we're going to lay it out. And it generally, and those moments I thought came off very well, but they didn't go anywhere near being able to effectively contain what the entire film-going experience was. Right. I think there are shots in this movie that folks might remember for a while.
Sure.
In terms of the quality of the movie, again, I think it came up short.
So basically the connective tissue between the bigger moments, and of course that connective tissue is what keeps the entire body together, doesn't work. And I do have to agree with that. And I think for me, that stuff I'm willing to let go. And maybe it's a summer movie thing for me. Maybe it's just the fact that I've seen, for me, the Godzilla films that I have seen, all of that connective tissue feels just as weak, versus what I really want to see, which is Godzilla and Ghidorah fight in the city in GMK, and the weird GMK, and this is a weird, interesting thing, because with GMK, I don't know what the fuck is going on half the time with, like, Mothra is destroyed and turns into dust and then takes over Ghidorah, but then Ghidorah's kid, like Mothra brings Ghidorah back to life like twice.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
There's weird stuff going on in that.
Spiritual stuff going on in that one.
Right. That's never explained. That has no, that doesn't mean anything. It's a really bizarre kind of scenario. But that doesn't, and for that brief moment, I'm going, what? I'm like, well, I guess it gets them back to fighting again. So okay, that's cool, right? And so yeah, and it's like or like the reporter, the female reporter is on a bridge in this thing delivering her report, and something hits the bridge, and of course she's going to fall, and she's hanging on to, and her cameraman is holding on to her, and oh no, what's going to happen? None of that stuff means anything to me. I have no connection to any of these people, because what they're doing and why they're doing it has no bearing on anything. It's not even like they're even trying to save the station or they're trying to do something important. It's just what their character is supposed to do and where they're supposed to be.
Have you watched the more recent Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, which is the one that has the bad Spielberg line? And
yeah. I don't know if I've seen that since we watched it originally back in the 90s when it first came out.
The character in that is an old general who has this kind of revenge thing going on with wanting to destroy Godzilla that connects back to World War II.
Sure.
That may be one of the more interesting approaches from a character standpoint in a Godzilla film.
Right.
And that's where I think, even though it has effects issues, even though it has this weird time travel, space alien kind of component going on, that character is kind of interesting and sort of stands out to a large degree versus a lot of the characters that you see trying to do whatever it is or whatever motivation they ultimately have in a lot of these films. And so maybe it's just difficult to, be able to make that sort of connectivity. But this is yet another example that just didn't get it done for me. And I thought the Cranston stuff had better potential, and maybe it's because he's a better actor.
Right.
Even if it wasn't one of his better things, it's kind of like Liam Neeson in the action films. The fact that Liam Neeson can act puts him on a higher plane, even if he doesn't have any material. I feel like Cranston is the same way. You stick Cranston's acting with what he had up against this other kid, and it's completely different element. It's as if Cranston is the daytime special effect, and the other guy is the nighttime cheating special effect, and we got stuck with the nighttime cheating special effect as opposed to the guy who could act.
Right.
And that's when I felt like I was cheated throughout this whole damn film. I don't want to be cheated with my Godzilla, Santo. I do not want to be cheated with my Godzilla.
Yeah, see, and that's funny only because you keep coming. I mean, for me, it's just I keep coming back to I feel I would say I feel cheated, but I don't, because every other human character minus the 54 in every other Godzilla film I've seen feels pretty superfluous throughout most of the time. So this is this is not the greatest Godzilla film on the planet. Of all of them, again, the 54 still wins because it was genuinely about something and wanting to entertain, but also encapsulate and be something of its time, and say something about Japan at that time and about their own fears, our own issues with our own self-destruction, etc. And this one wants to do that. This one does do that at times. And it never says anything flat out, which I also like. This was not a message movie per se, yet there's still messages within it. And yeah, I don't know. I think watching Godzilla be the good guy in one of these remakes finally is pretty fascinating to me, because it's the first time actually he's been a good guy in an American film. Because every other example that he's done, it's always the, oh no, we're being attacked by something, we've got to kill it because we're victims. If I'm not counting Captain America as a summer film, if this typifies what a good summer film should be for me. I do wish the characters had slightly more motivation. I don't know if it's an Aaron Taylor Johnson thing. There's definitely like the Olson, what's her name, Elizabeth Olsen as Elle Brody. She's useless. I mean, she's just there to be there. You know, I don't even know exactly what she does other than push gurneys around in a hospital. I don't know if she's a doctor. I don't know if she's a nurse. You know, and the kid doesn't add much. But again, I think there is intellectual ideas there with families and children and parents and responsibility, but emotionally nothing between any of the human stuff ever really clicks. Not even with, you know, I mean, they don't even have a moment where, no, they kind of have a moment where it's like he realizes his father was right, but it doesn't. There's never any payoff, you know. And again, he's so stoic and cold throughout with his performance, you know. And I don't know. And again, I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't think he's a horrible actor, but maybe he just haven't, you know. Maybe to him it was just a giant, you know, popcorn movie paycheck, and it probably was that way for all of them. I mean, I'm sure that all of them went into this thing thinking we're signing on for a big goofy summer movie, and Edwards ends up trying to do something a little more serious with it and a little bigger with it. And nobody was prepared for that, and so, you know, and maybe Edwards isn't very good of a. He's much better dealing with special effects sequences than he is dealing with actors. I mean, that's a heavy possibility as well. He could be completely useless when it comes to working with actors. I mean, this is only his second film, you know, and this is a huge film. And a bunch of those special effects sequences, like the parachute thing, things like that. He does a lot of things in here that you can see in his original film Monsters. That's, you know, it's all about the stuff kind of just out of sight, just off in the side a little bit that you catch glimpses of, but you never really know what's going on. And he's very good with those types of moments, but he just can't get people to connect emotionally yet, and that's a huge flaw. That is a massive flaw. But Godzilla himself, just the slow build, the slow reveal moments, just this thing kind of until we finally get to these battles. And I really liked the Vegas battle. I agree. It kind of felt like a cheat, but at the same time, the weird punchline, because it cuts from the attack starting to the kid sitting on the couch watching a news report from Vegas, and it cuts to the end. You know, mom is like doing her little thing, going, "Okay, you know, honey, stop, turn off the TV." Blah 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 blah. And they cut to the kid watching TV, and it's the Muto on top of Godzilla, them fighting in the middle of the thing for a bit, and it's a good laugh. I mean, it's a great laugh shot, but it is a bit of a cheat, I would say. I mean, but then again, it's also part of that building towards that big battle, where you finally really feel the satisfaction. So when you get to see Godzilla thwack one guy into a building, when he finally uses the radiation breath for the first time. That was another really wonderful shot where it's just like you see the little glowing tip of the tail, and then it slowly burn up, and it's like through the darkness, and all of a sudden, boom! It reveals Godzilla, and out comes the thing. When he grabs the second Muto, and takes it like down the mouth, and the head rips apart from the body.
Right out of Godzilla 2000.
Was it really? Okay, great. Yeah, because that was a fantastic little bit, you know. And I barely remember Godzilla 2000. Godzilla 2000, if I remember correctly, was one of those that really bored me for most of the running time.
I can see that.
So yes.
Having the great line. There's a little bit of Godzilla in all of us.
Well, there's a little bit of Godzilla in all of us, which is true.
I felt like Godzilla took a little bit of my life away tonight. You know, let me ask you something philosophically here.
Sure.
You know, and I know this has been running forever. The decision, the classic movie decision to slowly reveal the monster when you know that you're ultimately going to get the monster seems to be an outdated thing. And as a result of that, I would almost like to see the big special effect provided for you early in the film, so that you know that it's there, and it's not like, you know, let's get this going. Let's go. Let's make it happen. It doesn't. It seems like it's sort of this Spielbergian mentality, which is okay at the time, but I feel like maybe that time has passed, and I don't necessarily go in all that often anymore and say, holy crap, man, I'm glad I waited 70 minutes to finally see that cool special effect. might as well give it to me a little bit earlier, and then work your way around it story-wise from there. That's
See,
sort of
I think you blow your load too early in that kind of angle. I think for me, it really, I think the slow reveal really worked for me. And because it's not about, we already know what, and they've already shown us what Godzilla is going to look like in the trailers. We already know what Godzilla does. We already know what Godzilla is. It's the Jaws thing. It's the watching. It's the da watching the shark slowly move towards somebody. And admittedly, this is a hour and 10 before we kind of finally, not even an hour 10, probably about an hour until we finally get to that first big moment with him. But I don't know. To me, it was like watching a movie. And again, yeah, you did the whole Cloverfield comparison, which I agree with in the fact that it's like it's more about, we're watching the story from human perspective. We're watching this from the perspective of us, of people, of how it would probably actually be seen today in a weird way, if that makes any sense. Even though we're not watching everything as a news report, if we're on the boat, we're seeing basically what they're seeing from the boat, which is just all the little scales swimming through the water. If they're getting to the place too late, you're seeing what has been left behind. If they're getting there too early, there's nothing there. If they're getting caught in the middle of it, they're fucking dead. And that's just, and so that really, it added a level of realism to me, I guess, as far as the filmmaking goes, as far as the storytelling goes, and how information is being parsed out. Like in Vegas, it pops up on the screen that this is what's about to take place, and then all the power goes out because it's taking place. So nobody gets that chance to see anything or run or freak out. All of a sudden, it's just, crushed, and big old fake Eiffel Tower gets swapped down by one of the monsters. And that, to me, I really kind of, I liked that perspective versus the being able to see everything all the time thing that you kind of get from like even like the Marvel films, because the heroes are the good guys and the biggest guys. They're the ones. So it's like no matter where our heroes show up, everything's going to be cool, right? We're going to see they can. It's you're never going to get Godzilla walking away from an explosion looking cool, right?
But we should.
Yeah, maybe we should. Yeah, and yeah, giving the thumbs up. I mean, like literally, like I was worried at the very end when Godzilla wakes back up again and starts walking away back into the ocean and everything else like that. Like I was very scared of like they easily could have done the turnaround, thumbs up, take care, America, as he walks back into the water.
Yes, interesting. I thought the soundtrack was atrocious.
You know what? I was waiting for the Godzilla theme. I was kind of really shocked they didn't pull the Godzilla theme into it.
And one of the things that I think is really undervalued in a lot of the Godzilla films is the music.
Oh yeah.
There's a really ominous component about and orchestral component about a lot of the films.
Yeah.
And that very often carries through nicely. I thought this was a really overbearing soundtrack, Americanized soundtrack, but it didn't need to be an Americanized sound. It could have had the ominous components of what many of the Japanese movies do, and that often distracted me as well.
Yeah, and it's a bummer because Alexander Desplat, who did the soundtrack, he's a fabulous composer. But then it was like when they cut to Japan, suddenly you got like taiko drums, and I mean, it might as well it was like it was that awkward. I was like, really? That's the choice at this moment? And then when they're doing the skydive. In the trailer, it's interesting because in the trailer when they do the skydive, they're using a track from 2001, and it's when they are first. It's when the humans are first on the moon, seeing the monolith, and so that was used as a scratch track in the original teaser trailer for Godzilla. Then they don't use it in the score for this, but it was almost like they said, this is what we use in the trailer, do something kind of like this, but not this because we don't want to pay for it. And so it still had that kind of atonal thing going on.
Less to me.
It felt a lot less, yeah. Although the through his goggles skydiving, passing by Godzilla's face, that's another one of those great little shots. That's another one of those little moments for me that's like, that's just really cool, because it's all about, the entire film is all about individual perspectives. It's all about individual perspectives of who's looking at this now, even small minor characters like the little girl when she's being carried away. It's all about these little bits. And oh, they did something, and I don't know if this was supposed to be a pissing on Emmerich moment, but a guy runs into a hotel and closes the door and runs up the stairs, and they hold on the doors as the water hits the doors and rushes by, and you see the glass crack. Right. It's almost like the fire can turn corners kind of thing. But so it's like trying to do this almost realistic version of, yes, this might, it could hold up a little bit. The building's not going to collapse, but you'll actually see kind of the damage that's being done to it. There was never a moment in this one, as in the 54, with the girls doing the "we'll be with Daddy soon" moment. There's never any great human moments, but at the same time, there are general brush strokes with the with people. So I wouldn't say I was upset when they died, but at least I got the sense of people are dying, right? So yeah, so I don't know. I think at the end of the day, I was not half as disappointed as you were. As a matter of fact, I actually think that the as a Godzilla movie, I really enjoy it and will watch it again. It may not hold up as well for me over time. Like maybe once I see it twice, the Aaron Taylor Johnson character, will start grating on me more. But I was willing to let a lot of that kind of slide this first time around because I was just like, ooh, Godzilla's coming. Look at that. They're on the boat. They're watching him. He's getting there. And that was pretty satisfying for me. And by the time we finally got to that big battle between him and the Mutos, and the wrestling, as it's been referred to by some people, I really enjoyed the hell out of that stuff. So yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
Sounds good. So okay. So on a really quick then, where would you? I mean, amongst the Godzilla films, would you rate this down towards the bottom?
No. It is. I mean, it's solidly in the middle. I think it's the best American representation of a Godzilla film, but that
totally.
is not a compliment.
No, I agree. Yeah.
And if there are, what are we, close to 30 Godzilla films now?
Something like that.
If we're close to 30, this one's a heck of a lot closer to 15.
Right. Okay.
It's right. And if I was rating on a scale to 100, I'd probably be in the neighborhood of 55.
Gotcha.
So it's not a complete bust, but it's not anywhere near the potential that I think it had an opportunity to achieve.
It's still flunked.
Whether others. I'm very curious to see how others, how others perceive that.
Right. Yeah. It's yeah. Also, I think one of the things I really kind of dig about it is it's not a typical blockbuster. It's not action scene. Transformers 4 is just going to be, once we get past the first 20 minutes of a 2-hour and 40-minute movie, probably.
Right.
That it's that's just going to be nothing but bombast.
Right.
It never felt, other than the score at times, this movie never felt bombastic to me. Right. Yeah, I don't know. I would recommend seeing. I would definitely recommend if you're going to see it, I would definitely recommend seeing it on a big screen, versus waiting for television. But yeah. So would you see a sequel?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think I think it's depending on how they were ultimately deciding to approach it too. I think it has. There's a possibility that this could be one of those things where they go back and watch this breakdown of Film Geek Primer here, listen to our breakdown brilliance, and they say, man, those are really good ideas. We could definitely approach a sequel with some of the ideas, and then from there imagine the possibilities.
Yeah, you're right. We very well maybe have the nucleus of a franchise on this site.
There you go, FGP, the franchise.
That's right. So cool. All right, Schu, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate the time. And I'm bummed. I'm sorry that it didn't come close to getting where you wanted it to be, which is kind of a bummer because really that's I would hope for that more than my own enjoyment of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is what it is, Yeah. Let me ask you that quickly, since we're not getting out of here at any time soon, apparently, and this is just running on forever. This was an instance where I watched cinema destroy a 15-year-old kid. Okay? Right. Do you, off the top of your head, have a moment that you recall where cinema took your youth, took your innocence, or just punched you in the gut.
Oh, this is kind of the classic George Lucas raped my childhood troll.
Yes.
Like when I was actually young.
No, whenever.
Whenever. Well,
Could
I mean,
last week. I mean,
yeah.
but I'm wondering if you were, you were impressionable. You were at the movies. You loved cinema. This was a franchise you were really into. Excited to see that movie, and man, did it suck! And it almost like took the soul out of you. It was that kind of suck. Because that's what I saw tonight. I saw a 15-year-old soul get ripped from him because he thought this movie was that poor.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's, of course, Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull did that to me. The Phantom Menace did that, but in a different way, where I was in denial. I saw it like twice in less than 24 hours. Because
it couldn't have been that bad the first time.
Well, it was funny because it was like I walked out of it the first time. That was one of those movies where I walked out of the first time and I was like, that's good, right? I think it's good. I'm pretty positive it's good. It's got neat stuff. It's got the pod race. It's got this. It's got that. And then I went with so it was like a matinee that I just lucked upon, and there was nobody in line, so I called up a friend really quick and we saw it because we were just dying to see it. And then I saw it again either that evening or the evening after with the girl I was dating at the time. And we walked out of it, and she was doing the same thing I was the first time, which was, yeah, the pod race was neat. That was, and I was like, no, it's not good. It's not good. We got fucked. We waited this long, and it's just not that good. So those were, I think those were definitely kind of things like that. Yeah, I can't, and that's the deal. Is I believe that would probably only happen in franchises. Mm-hmm. Where it's like you've been, so much has been built up over so much time that's the only way it can really suck that out of your soul. Versus if you see, like, Prometheus in a weird way doesn't do that because, well, you've already got Alien Resurrection. But it also tries to not be part of the franchise in a weird way, so you can't go, that just destroyed, the entire Alien franchise for me. But yeah, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was one that really, I was like, oh, fuck them. Why would they do this to me? That one really hurt. That one really hurt because I was such an Indiana Jones fan growing up. That thing may happen, there's the potential of that happening with Mad Max Fury Road, because Mad Max was such a huge thing for me when I was a kid. That Fury Road next year has the potential of doing that. I'm hoping that the people involved in the cast, it won't. So we'll see what happens there. That could be my future Godzilla. But yeah, as of right now, not yet. I would have to say Crystal Skull was the one that really kind of broke my heart and killed. I think now it's almost like, in a weird way though, also we were weaned in a time where sequels, we could try to like a sequel, but they always sucked. We can look at Die Hard 2 because we were in a time when they weren't built as franchises per se, right? But like even the Hobbit movies now, I couldn't care less, right? It's like okay, the Lord of the Rings films are good, but you're not destroying that for me with the Hobbit movies, but you're also not helping me with those Hobbit movies. Yeah, and it's and of course older now, it's like I can see a money grab, and this is not a money grab. I don't feel like this is a money grab movie. They're trying, yes. Whether they succeeded or not, This is not a.
I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, we're not trying to make a quick buck off this.
There was care in what they were trying to get across. I just think there were a lot of areas where they came up short.
Yeah, and I think I'll give them credit for. I think I let that where they came up short pass, because you can see that there really is a lot of honesty put into this film. There's genuine skill and genuine heart put into trying to make a movie that people will like.
Yet oddly enough, and there's an example that I often utilize here, and I don't feel as though this Godzilla is in that category, because I think while they tried to improve on special effects, they didn't really do nearly enough to try to improve and build upon the foundation that was set before them. The example that I use from a franchise standpoint is Ang Lee's Hulk.
Right.
Ang Lee's Hulk, I think, was a horribly flawed movie that fucking shot for the stars and came up short.
Yeah.
And because it did, I feel forgiving about it.
Right.
Because it tried to be so much more than a lot of other, at the time, comic book movies wanted to be.
Sure.
He had an idea of what he wanted to do. He thought he had a potential. He went for it, and it came up short. I feel like these guys clearly appreciate the material.
Right.
But they didn't shoot for the stars.
Right.
And so I can kind of walk the bridge halfway. But then I feel like Muto, wrapped away some cables, and I got some cool Dolby special effects in both of my ears of cables snapping, and the bridge ultimately fell, and that was about it. Sure. I didn't get to the other side of the.
Sure.
I didn't get to the other side of the river.
Yeah, and and it's
down in the middle, and that's why it gets about a 55.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. I mean, it could
also be about 5 I Frankensteins.
Wow, wow, wow. That's rough. Although I don't know, 5 I Frankensteins. That's high on the I Frankenstein list, I think.
I think so. I don't even remember what the I Frankenstein list is, in fairness. So I don't know if I'm undervaluing or overvaluing here.
Right. It's a good point.
It's an accurate value. It's like a level of currency. I think it fluctuates from day to day.
Sure. Yeah. It's the euro of cinematic currency.
Yes.
Anyways, cool. All right, so where can folks find you?
Oh, hell, I forget. Where the hell can they find me? SCH Universe. That would be Shuniverse. So all of you out there who think that this Godzilla is the greatest bleeping Godzilla you've ever seen and don't know what the crap I'm talking about and hate that I'm as jaded as I ultimately am and completely missed the point and loved the effects and thought the acting was fantastic and the story was incredible, you can let me know by tweeting me. Is that what they call it? Tweeting me.
Yeah. Shuniverse and
Shuniverse.
And of course, you can reach me at John Santo. Please subscribe to our channel. Click that little button that says subscribe. We can really use it. Thank you. And that's it. So that's our review of Godzilla 2014. I would say 1 positive, 1 negative. I believe this is a 50-50 split on this one. Which means that's great. You get to decide for yourself how you feel instead of it being unanimous on our end and you then going, wait a minute, you guys are idiots, or yes, we're behind you. So congrats, you can have your very own opinion. Good for you guys. So good luck with everything, and of course every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Pacific, Film Geek Primer live. So no matter what, join us then. Thanks. Have a good night.